The American lawn and garden industry is $50 billion a year. Drip irrigation alone is another $10 billion globally and growing at 13% annually. There are smart sprinkler systems with phone apps. There are soil moisture sensors that text you when your tomatoes are thirsty. There are subscription services that schedule your watering by the weather forecast. And the average backyard gardener still loses 30 to 50% of every gallon they pour to evaporation, runoff, and water that sinks below the root zone before the plant ever touches it. There is a solution to this. It costs about $5. It uses no electricity, no pressure, no plastic, no batteries, and no app. It was documented in the world's first agricultural science textbook over 2,000 years ago. The Romans used it. The Chinese used it 4,000 years ago. The Hohokam people irrigated the Sonoran desert with it. And the modern irrigation industry, is now valued at over $10 billion, has no financial reason to ever mention it to you. To understand why, start with how a drip system actually performs in a real backyard. The drip irrigation problem nobody talks about. Drip irrigation is sold as the efficient option. Compared to overhead sprinklers, which lose 30 to 50% of their water to evaporation before it ever touches the soil, drip is genuinely better. That part is true. But the comparison stops there, because drip emitters operate on a timer. They release water on a schedule the gardener sets, and the schedule has nothing to do with what the plant actually needs at that moment. So the system runs at 6 in the morning whether the soil is bone dry or already saturated from last night's rain. The water that exceeds what the plant can absorb sinks below the root zone, pulled by gravity. The water that arrives during peak heat partially evaporates from the surface before the roots can use it. Subsurface drip cuts losses, but requires installation depth most homeowners never achieve. Standard drip tape sits on the surface and the inefficiency follows. The maintenance is the other half. Drip emitters clog with mineral deposits, sediment, biofilm, root intrusion. The fix is regular flushing, filter changes, and inspection that most home gardeners abandon after the first season. The result is a system that costs $300 to $800 to install, requires ongoing labor, and delivers efficiency gains that look impressive on a brochure, but rarely materialize in a real backyard. The clay pot that beats every modern system. Now consider the alternative. An olla, pronounced oya, is an unglazed terracotta vessel with a narrow neck and a rounded body. You bury it in the ground up to its neck. You fill it with water, you plant your vegetables in a circle around it. That is the entire system. Here's what happens next, and the physics of it is the part the irrigation industry never wants you to think about. The walls of an unglazed terracotta pot are porous at a microscopic scale. Water inside the pot is held by surface tension against the inner wall. The dry soil on the outside of the pot pulls that water through the wall by capillary action, the same physical force that pulls water up the trunk of a tree. The drier the soil, the harder it pulls. The wetter the soil, the more the flow slows. When the soil reaches field capacity, the flow essentially stops. Read that again. The system regulates itself. The plant's own water demand, transmitted through the soil moisture gradient, controls how much water the olla releases. There is no timer, no sensor, no app, no moving parts, no electricity. The plant takes what it needs, when it needs it, and the system does nothing else. There is no evaporation loss because the water is delivered below the soil surface. There is no runoff because the water never sits on top of anything. There is no overwatering because the soil tells the pot to stop. There is no underwatering because the plant's own roots wrap around the pot and draw moisture continuously. Multiple sources document the savings. The Farmer's Almanac cites 50 to 70% water reduction compared to surface irrigation. University of Arizona studies have measured 30 to 50% reductions even in dry soil conditions, where the comparison should favor mechanical systems. Independent gardeners using ollas in side-by-side trials report 70% water reductions consistently. Bill Mollison, the Australian researcher who founded the modern permaculture movement, called clay pot irrigation the most efficient irrigation system in the world. He had access to every drip system on the market when he said that. The history nobody teaches. The first written reference to Ala irrigation appears in the Fanshenqi Shu, a Chinese agricultural manual compiled around the 1st century BC. That document is over 2,000 years old. The technique itself is older. Archaeological evidence places it in ancient Mesopotamia at least 4,000 years ago. The Romans adopted it from earlier Mediterranean cultures and called it the aula. In pre-Columbian America, the Hohokam civilization in what is now Arizona used clay pot irrigation to grow corn, beans, and squash in the Sonoran desert, in conditions where modern agriculture without industrial irrigation would be impossible. It spread because it worked. It survived because it worked. Subsistence farmers in India, Iran, Burkina Faso, Brazil, and rural China still use it today, not as a heritage practice, but as the rational choice for anyone whose water supply is limited and whose budget cannot support a mechanical system. The United Nations and organizations like WaterAid actively promote Ala irrigation in drought-affected regions because no other technique delivers the same efficiency at the same cost. A medium-sized Ala covers a circle roughly 2 feet in diameter. A larger one covers up to 4 feet. The cost to make one from 2 standard terracotta flower pots and a tube of silicone is under $5. Now follow the money. The global drip irrigation market was valued at nearly $10 billion in 2025 and is projected to more than double by 2033. The American residential lawn and garden industry sits at $50 billion annually. The companies that dominate this market, Toro, Rainbird, Hunter Industries, Jane, Netafim, sell pumps, filters, emitters, controllers, sensors, tubing, fittings, and replacement parts. Their entire business model depends on a homeowner buying an installed system, then buying replacement components every few years, then upgrading to a smart version, then connecting it to an app, then subscribing to a service. A clay pot has none of those revenue streams. You buy it once. It lasts for years. It does not connect to anything. It does not require maintenance beyond an occasional refill. You cannot sell a software update for an Ola. You cannot bundle it with a service plan. You cannot meter it. From the perspective of every business in the residential irrigation market, the Ola is not a competing product. It is a category problem. It is the wrong shape of solution for a market built around recurring revenue. That is why you have never seen an Ola in a Home Depot garden center. That is why your local nursery sells you drip tape and timers. That is why every gardening blog promoted by major brands talks about smart sprinklers and skips the 4,000-year-old method that beats them all on every metric that matters. The information is not hidden. It is just not profitable to share. 2 honest caveats. First, Olas have limits. They work best in raised beds, vegetable gardens, and container plantings where you can space them evenly. They are not practical for large field crops, lawns, or sprawling perennial landscapes. If you are trying to irrigate an acre of corn, you need a different solution. For a backyard vegetable garden of 1 to 400 square feet, Olas outperform anything you can buy. Second, terracotta is fragile. A clay pot can crack from freezing if you leave it in the ground over winter in a cold climate, and it can break if you hit it with a shovel. The fix is simple. Empty the pots before the first frost, store them indoors, and reinstall in spring. Done correctly, an Ola lasts 5 to 10 years. The cost to replace one is under $5. What you can do this weekend: take 2 unglazed terracotta flower pots from any garden store, the kind that costs $3 each. Seal the drain hole on one of them with silicone or a cork. Glue the second pot upside down on top of the first, rim to rim, sealing the joint with silicone. You now have a sealed clay vessel with a small opening at the top. Bury it in your garden bed up to the neck. Fill it with water. Plant your tomatoes, peppers, squash, lettuce, and herbs in a circle around it within 12 to 18 inches. Cover the top opening with a small saucer or stone to prevent evaporation and keep mosquitoes out. Refill every 3 to 7 days, depending on the weather. That is the system. The total cost is under $10 per Ola. The water savings, measured against a standard surface watering routine, are between 50 and 70%. The labor required is roughly 1 minute of refilling per pot per week. The maintenance is zero. Your garden will use less water, your plants will grow stronger root systems because they reach for moisture instead of being flooded with it. Your weeds will decrease because the surface stays dry. Your water bill will drop. And the entire $10 billion drip irrigation industry will not get a single dollar from you. The technology has been on the shelf for 4,000 years. The science is documented by universities, by the United Nations, and by every gardener who has compared the two systems side by side. The only thing standing between you and the most efficient irrigation method ever invented is a marketing budget that depends on you never finding out it exists. If you want to see how the same pattern plays out with the food you eat, how two things sitting in your kitchen right now beat every bag of fertilizer at the garden center, that video is on screen now.